When we talk about Dajjal, we have to begin by correcting a very common misunderstanding. Many people imagine Dajjal as nothing more than a single individual who appears suddenly at the end of time, performs extraordinary feats, and then disappears from the scene. But our tradition invites us to think more deeply than that. Dajjal is not only a man, he represents the ultimate fitna, the final and most dangerous test of truth versus falsehood. He embodies deception in its most polished, persuasive, and convincing form. And that is why the prophet letter, FDFA, warned us about him more than any other trial, even warning every prophet before him to warn their nations about this same danger. Dajjal's power does not lie in brute force, it lies in persuasion. It lies in blurring truth and falsehood so thoroughly that people willingly follow him while thinking they are doing good. He will claim authority he does not deserve, promise security he cannot truly give, and redefine success in ways that slowly detach people from Allah. This is why our scholars have always said that Dajjal succeeds not because people are ignorant, but because they are spiritually unprepared. When a man is shallow, when knowledge is selective, when faith is reduced to slogans rather than submission, deception becomes easy. And this is where Dajjal stops being only a future figure and starts becoming a present lesson. Dajjal is a system of falsehood before he is a person. Any system that glorifies power without morality, progress without accountability, freedom without responsibility, and knowledge without humility carries Dajjal-like qualities. The prophet FDFA described Dajjal as seeing but blind, speaking eloquently but lying constantly. These descriptions are not accidental. They remind us that deception often wears the face of intelligence, advancement, and even compassion. One of the most dangerous aspects of Dajjal is that he will exploit fear and desire. Fear of poverty, fear of instability, fear of loss. Desire for comfort, recognition, safety, and control. When people are afraid, they stop asking the right questions. When people are desperate, they accept false solutions. This is why trials are never just external events. They are internal struggles. The real question is not whether Dajjal will come, but whether our hearts are trained to recognize falsehood when it speaks confidently. Notice also that the prophet letter, FDFA, taught us specific protections against Dajjal, and none of them are political strategies or survival tactics. He taught us knowledge, remembrance, sincerity, and connection to the Qur'an. The opening verses of Surah Al-Kahf are not a coincidence. That surah is about truth versus illusion, faith versus power, humility versus arrogance. In other words, Dajjal is defeated first in the heart, long before he is defeated on the earth. So when we speak about Dajjal, we are not meant to panic, we are meant to prepare. We are meant to sharpen our moral compass, deepen our understanding of our faith, and anchor ourselves to truth even when falsehood looks attractive. Because the greatest danger is not that deception exists, but that it feels normal, comfortable, and justified. And if we do not train ourselves to recognize falsehood now, we will not recognize it when it matters most. When the Quran speaks about smoke, Dukhan, it does so in a way that immediately captures the human imagination. Allah says to watch for the day when the sky will bring a visible smoke that will envelop people. From the earliest generations of scholars, this verse was discussed, debated, and reflected upon deeply. Some understood it as an event that occurred during the lifetime of the Prophet, letter FDA, as a form of punishment, while many others understood it as one of the major signs yet to come before the end of time. What matters for us is not reducing this discussion to a single rigid interpretation, but appreciating why Allah chose smoke as a sign in the first place. Smoke is unique. It does not strike instantly like lightning, nor does it destroy selectively like a weapon. Smoke spreads, it lingers, it suffocates slowly. It blurs vision and creates confusion. You cannot see clearly when smoke fills the air, and that detail is not insignificant. Whether *Dukhan* is literal, symbolic, or a combination of both, the message remains the same. This is a sign meant to overwhelm, disorient, and humble humanity. It is a reminder that no matter how advanced we become, no matter how secure we believe ourselves to be, we are never beyond vulnerability. Now, when people today hear the word smoke, their minds naturally go to images that did not exist in earlier centuries. Industrial pollution, chemical warfare, environmental collapse, and yes, even nuclear devastation. Scholars have cautioned us against declaring with certainty what Allah has left ambiguous. Islam does not require us to assign modern labels to prophetic signs in order for them to be meaningful, but it does allow us to reflect, and reflection is not the same as speculation. Reflection asks, what patterns do we see in human behavior that make such signs plausible? What moral warnings are embedded within these descriptions? One of the striking realities of our time is that humanity now possesses the ability to fill the skies with smoke by its own hands. Wars are no longer confined to battlefields. Their consequences travel across borders, poison air, land, and generations yet unborn. And yet, despite this power, we remain spiritually fragile. The Quran does not mention *Dukhan* to impress us with imagery, but to confront us with accountability. When Allah allows the consequences of human arrogance to become visible, it is not merely punishment, it is exposure. There is also a spiritual dimension here that cannot be ignored. Smoke clouds judgment just as moral confusion clouds the heart. When truth and falsehood are mixed, when injustice is justified, when destruction is reframed as necessity, society begins to suffocate inwardly long before it collapses outwardly. This is why the Quran often links signs in the heavens with conditions of the heart. External chaos is rarely divorced from internal decay. So the purpose of reflecting on *Dukhan* is not to predict dates or catastrophes. It is to ask ourselves whether we are contributing to clarity or confusion, to healing or harm, to truth or distortion. Signs are not given to satisfy curiosity. They are given to awaken conscience. Because when the air becomes heavy and vision is lost, only those anchored to truth will know which direction to move. One of the greatest dangers when discussing end times imagery is that our focus quietly shifts from spiritual accountability to raw fear. Fear is powerful. Fear spreads faster than knowledge, and it settles deeper than reflection. When people hear words like nuclear destruction, global collapse, or mass annihilation, the heart tightens, the imagination runs wild, and suddenly faith is replaced with anxiety. And this is exactly where we need to pause and recalibrate. Islam never taught us to live in a constant state of panic about the future. It taught us to live in a constant state of responsibility in the present. There is no doubt that physical catastrophes are real. Human history is filled with moments of destruction, and modern technology has amplified our capacity for harm. But the Quran and Sunnah consistently redirect our attention from merely asterisk. What asterisk can happen to asterisk? Who we become asterisk when trials unfold? Fear itself can become a tool of deception. When fear dominates, people surrender principles for protection, ethics for survival, and truth for comfort. This is not preparation, this is vulnerability. One of the defining traits of deception is exaggeration without guidance. Catastrophe without context, warnings without wisdom. The believer is not asked to deny danger, but to understand it correctly. The Prophet warned us of immense trials, yet he never allowed those warnings to paralyze the Ummah. Instead, he paired them with clarity, balance, and purpose. He taught us that the real collapse is not when cities fall, but when hearts detach from Allah. Buildings can be rebuilt. Faith, once corrupted, is far harder to restore. There is also a subtle trap here. When people become obsessed with worst-case scenarios, they begin to measure faith by survival rather than submission. They ask, "How do I escape?" instead of, "How do I remain sincere?" They chase predictions instead of purification. And ironically, this obsession makes people easier to manipulate. A fearful population is far more willing to accept false saviors, false narratives, and false compromises. This is how spiritual failure often precedes physical disaster. Islamic tradition consistently reminds us that trials are tests, not signals to abandon our values. When hardship comes, we are not excused from truthfulness. When danger rises, we are not permitted to oppress. When uncertainty spreads, we are not allowed to fabricate certainty. Nuclear fear, environmental fear, global fear, none of it justifies moral shortcuts. If anything, it demands greater integrity. Because the believer's role is not merely to survive history, but to bear witness within it. This is why the Quran repeatedly emphasizes that calamities are reminders, not endings. They strip away illusions of control. They expose arrogance disguised as progress. They humble nations that believed themselves untouchable. But they are never the final word. The final word belongs to Allah, not to weapons, not to smoke, not to human power. So we must be careful not to let fear rewrite our theology. Islam is not a religion of countdowns and conspiracies. It is a religion of consciousness, patience, and moral clarity. And if we allow fear to dominate our faith, then deception has already succeeded. Because the greatest disaster is not what happens to the world, but what happens to the heart when fear replaces trust in Allah. When the discussion turns to the Mahdi, it is very easy for emotions to take over. For some, the Mahdi becomes a symbol of instant rescue, a figure who appears to fix everything overnight. For others, the concept is distorted into chaos, rebellion, or bloodshed. But when we return to the authentic teachings of our tradition, a very different picture emerges. The Mahdi is not a figure of confusion. He is a figure of clarity. He does not rise to tear society apart. He emerges to put it back together. The Prophet described a time of immense injustice, a world weighed down by oppression, imbalance, and moral exhaustion. It is within that context that the Mahdi appears, not as a revolutionary chasing power, but as a reluctant leader upon whom responsibility is placed. This detail matters. The Mahdi does not campaign for authority, nor does he manipulate fear to gain followers. His legitimacy is not built on slogans or force, but on trust, character, and alignment with prophetic ethics. In a world accustomed to loud leaders, his strength lies in restraint. Justice is the defining feature of his mission. Not vengeance, not domination, justice. The Prophet described that he will fill the earth with fairness as it was filled with injustice. And notice the balance in that statement. He does not erase struggle instantly, but he restores moral order. He recenters society around accountability to Allah rather than submission to power. This is critical because Islam does not promise a utopia free of hardship. It promises leadership that anchors hardship in meaning and righteousness. We are also warned very clearly about false claimants. Throughout history, many have exploited the name of the Mahdi to justify violence, division, and extremism. Our scholars have consistently cautioned that any movement rooted in chaos, bloodlust, or disregard for innocent life cannot represent prophetic guidance. The Mahdi does not arrive on a wave of anarchy. He arrives when hearts are exhausted from injustice and ready to recognize true leadership. That recognition itself is a test. Another important correction is this: The Mahdi is not the solution to our negligence. He is not an excuse for spiritual laziness. We are not told to sit back, abandon reform, and wait for a savior. On the contrary, the Prophet letter, FDA taught us to act with integrity regardless of outcomes. The Mahdi's presence does not remove responsibility, it amplifies it. His leadership succeeds because there remains a community that values justice, truth, and faith enough to support it. And this brings us back to balance. Just as Islam warns us against obsessing over Dajjal, it warns us against romanticizing the Mahdi. Both extremes distort faith. One produces fear without hope, the other produces hope without effort. The believer walks between the two. We prepare for trials without panic, and we hope for relief without entitlement. In the end, the Mahdi reminds us that Allah has not abandoned this world to injustice. No matter how dark the night becomes, guidance is never extinguished. But that guidance only benefits those who are already oriented toward truth. Because true leadership does not save a people who refuse to be just. And relief does not arrive for hearts unwilling to submit to Allah. When we talk about the signs of the end times, about Dajjal, smoke, or even the coming of the Mahdi, it is very easy to get caught up in speculation and sensationalism. The human mind is naturally drawn to the dramatic, the extraordinary, the terrifying. But Islam teaches us something far more profound, that the real test is not in identifying the signs themselves, but in preparing ourselves spiritually and morally before they even appear. The believer's responsibility is not to chase predictions, but to strengthen the heart, to deepen the faith, and to act with righteousness in every moment. Preparation begins with knowledge, not just information about what might happen, but true understanding of what Allah expects of us. When the Prophet letter FDA warned about trials and deception, he always paired those warnings with guidance. He taught us to memorize the Qur'an, to establish regular prayer, to maintain honesty, and to act with patience. These practices are not symbolic. They are the armor of the soul. They are what allow a person to recognize truth when everyone else is blinded by illusion, to stand firm when fear is normalized, and to act rightly when injustice seems inevitable. Equally important is the cultivation of sincerity. One can know the signs intellectually, can recite the narrations, and even predict events with scholarly caution. But if the heart is not sincere, this knowledge becomes a trap. A person who knows but does not act will become like the majority the Prophet letter FDA warned about. Those who see clearly but fail to implement, those who hear the truth but allow themselves to be swayed by appearances. Sincerity is not a feeling, it is a practice. It is reflected in our daily choices, honesty in business, fairness in judgment, compassion in interactions, and humility in our worship. Community also plays a critical role. The trials of the end times are not only individual tests, they are collective ones. Just as a person cannot navigate a storm alone, a society cannot weather corruption and deception without moral anchors. The Prophet letter FDA repeatedly emphasized the importance of remaining connected to righteous people, supporting one another in knowledge, in accountability, and in patience. Isolation in these times is dangerous because deception is far easier when hearts are alone. Finally, there is the matter of balance. Obsession with signs can lead to fear, while neglect of signs can lead to complacency. The believer must walk between these extremes, maintaining vigilance without panic, hope without entitlement. Preparing spiritually and morally does not mean abandoning the world. It means engaging with it through the lens of faith, striving to improve ourselves and our communities while trusting in Allah's wisdom. So when we speak about preparation, it is not a distant concept. It is a daily responsibility. Every act of honesty, every prayer offered with presence, every effort toward justice, every moment of patience and humility is a step toward readiness. The signs may come suddenly, or they may unfold slowly over generations. But those who have cultivated their hearts will not be caught unprepared, because the greatest safeguard against trials is not predicting the future. It is living faithfully in the present. Even when we speak about the trials of the end times, the deceptions of Dajjal, the smoke that clouds the skies, the uncertainty and fear that accompanies upheaval, it is crucial to remember that Islam does not leave us in despair. The message of our faith is not despair, it is hope. Hope grounded not in wishful thinking or blind optimism, but in the unshakable truth that Allah's plan is just, His guidance is clear, and His justice will prevail. The greatest lesson of the end times is that while chaos may rise, falsehood will not last, and truth will always re-emerge. The Quran repeatedly reminds us that for every trial there is a measure of mercy, for every darkness a chance for light. Even when Dajjal spreads deception and people are confused, there remains a path for those who seek truth sincerely. Even when smoke covers the earth, obscuring vision, hearts that are anchored in faith can still see clearly. Even when oppression seems overwhelming, those who hold fast to justice and integrity will find guidance. This is not theoretical, it is practical. It is about training the heart to recognize light, to trust in Allah, and to act righteously even when circumstances suggest surrender. Hope is also an active force, not passive. It inspires resilience. It calls us to prepare spiritually, to uphold morality, to help our communities, and to support justice in every way we can. Waiting for the Mahdi does not absolve us from action. It calls us to embody the principles he represents now. Standing firm against falsehood does not mean retreating from the world. It means engaging in it with courage, wisdom, and patience. Each act of integrity, each moment of sincere worship, each effort to uphold justice strengthens the foundation of hope and builds a shield against deception. It is also important to understand that hope is not naive. Islam teaches us to recognize danger, to acknowledge trials, and to be vigilant. But even in the darkest moments, hope prevents despair. It reminds us that Dajjal's influence is temporary, that oppression cannot last forever, and that Allah's wisdom governs the outcome of history. In other words, hope does not deny reality. It transcends it. It is the confidence that no matter how overwhelming the challenges, truth and righteousness will ultimately triumph. This is why the end times narratives are not meant to terrify us into passivity or to seduce us into reckless speculation. They are meant to orient us. They remind us that trials are tests, falsehoods are temporary, and the ultimate victory belongs to those who remain faithful. Hope in this context is both a compass and a shield. It directs us toward moral clarity, anchors us in perseverance, and strengthens our resolve to uphold the principles of our faith regardless of circumstance. So when we conclude our reflection on these trials, the ultimate message is clear. Even amidst deception, chaos, and fear, truth will prevail, and hope is the weapon of the believer. Because, no matter how long the night may seem, the light of Allah's justice will never be extinguished. For